Welcome to Excel Basics video number 15. Hey, in this video, we got to talk about the Excel table feature to create dynamic ranges for VLOOKUP, pivot tables, and more. And what that means is instead of storing data in just cells in the spreadsheet, we'll convert our data to an Excel table. Then when we create a formula like VLOOKUP, it will be pointing towards the table. And if we add any new records, it'll totally see the new records. Not only that, but if we create a chart for our daily sales, when I add a new record here with the new sales, instantly a new column will show up for our new sales. Here's our 4 examples. We're going to look at VLOOKUP data validation chart pivot table and other formulas using the Excel table feature. Now I want to go over to the sheet VLOOKUP DVL. Now at the top I have some notes about the Excel table feature. Those are also over in the PDFs, which are downloadable below the video. Here's our first example. And I've already done data validation list. We learned how to do this last video. I can select from a drop-down. It immediately changes to Busn, and our VLOOKUP function changes, retrieves the price for the Busn. Now, the problem with this setup right here is if I come and add a new product, we just got the new Aspen boomerang tab. That's from Colorado. Notice when I type CO, it looks above, and there's only one other word with CO. So it tries to autocomplete, and I want to accept it, so I'm going to hit Tab. The cost is $11, and the retail price is $22.95. Now, when I come up to my drop-down and click it, I do not see the newest boomerang Aspen. And certainly the VLOOKUP, you can see it's still only looking at the original table. Now, if we convert this to an Excel table, all of this would automatically update. So let's see how to do this. This is the first time we've converted a table to an Excel table, so we can take advantage of the dynamic ranges. Now, there's a few rules. You have to have a proper data set, which means field names at the top, records in rows, and you have to have your empty cells all the way around. As long as you have that proper data set, you can convert it to an Excel table by clicking in a single cell, going up to Insert, Tables Group, and click the Table button. Or you can see that keyboard, Control-T. So that's what we're going to use. We're going to use Control-T. And just like that, the Create Table dialog box pops up. It guesses because we had empty cells all the way around. And because we have a proper data set, it says my table has headers. If you don't have headers, it'll put column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4, which are not good field names or column header names. I'm going to click OK. Immediately, we get a new ribbon tab, Table Tools, Design. Now, you can change the color if you want. But what we want to do every time is come over to Properties, and we want to name our table. We always want to give it a smart name. I'm going to call this table Price Lookup. And now if I hit Enter, now this table is named Price Lookup. Now let's come over and create our VLOOKUP formula. Equals VL tab. Just like we saw last video, we have a lookup value. We want to look up the quad product and try to find a match in our first column, comma. Now, the table array, we need to put the whole lookup table in, just like we did last video. But watch what happens. I'm highlighting the inside part of our Excel table, not the field names. And as soon as I do that, it has the name of our table. And that table is totally dynamic. Even if I add new columns or new records, that table will always update. So that's our table array, comma. Column index, we still have to count the columns. 1, 2, 3, 4. The retail price is in the 4th column. So we have to tell VLOOKUP which one of the columns has the thing that I want to go and get. and bring back to the cell. So I'm going to put a 4 there. Now VLOOKUP knows to always get the items from the 4th column. Comma. We're doing exact match. You can put false or put a 0. I'm putting a 0. Close parentheses and enter. Now, I want to add data validation. So I'm going to click in this cell, data, over to data tools. And just like we saw last video, I click on data validation. I do not want to allow anything to go in this cell unless it's one of the product names. So I select allow list. Only allow items from a list. I click in source. I highlight the product column. There's the range. I click OK. Now let's test it. Let's look. Right now there's Flying Eagle all the way to Carlota. If I change it to Carlota, just like that VLOOKUP works. Now, let's add a new product like we did up here, except for this time, everything will update. Now, I'm going to click in the last cell in the last record. And when I hit Tab, it automatically adds a new row to this table. Now, since this table is dynamic, you don't want to keep stuff below it. All right, I'm going to type Aspen, tab, CO. It's auto-completing. I'm going to tab. 11, tab, 22.95. And I'm not going to hit tab because that would add an empty record. I'm going to hit enter. And now watch this. I come to the drop-down, click, and there's Aspen. Just like that, it totally sees the new product and our price. Our F2 VLOOKUP function has totally updated. So that's a first example of the dynamic ranges in an Excel table. I'm going to hit enter. Let's go over to the next sheet, chart. Now here we have a simple table, date, and these are your sales. So I put your name. And here, each one of these days, so far this week, you've entered your sales. I want to make a chart, a column chart, that will automatically update as I add new records. Now I'm going to click in a single cell, Control-T to convert it to an Excel table. I see the range. My table has headers. Click OK. Now I'm actually going to add some number formatting. So I highlight these 3 cells, go up to Home, drop down for Currency, and select Currency. Now, when I add a new record later, that number formatting will carry forward also. Now we want to make sure and name our table. So we come up to Table Tools, Design, all the way over to Properties. I'm going to click in the table name text box and type some smart name. I'm going to type My Sales, enter, since these are your sales. All right, now let's create a column chart. Clicking in a single cell, we go up to Insert, over to Charts. Click the drop down for column, and I'm going to select the very first one, clustered column. Now this chart came out just how we wanted it. We want the name from the sales column to be our chart title. There's the height, the dates, and that's fine if we have our numbers over here. Now let's test the dynamic ranges in this Excel table and in our chart. I'm going to click in the last cell in the last record and hit Tab. Now I'm going to enter 11/9. When I hit Tab, this number formatting will also carry forward. Tab. And you had really awesome sales, 9,125.65. Now I'm not going to hit Tab because I don't want to add a new record. I'm going to hit Enter. And watch. Over here you can already see the label. But when I hit Enter, that is absolutely amazing. And as I keep adding sales, it'll keep adding new dynamic columns. All right, so Excel table, we converted it, named it, and created a chart. And the chart totally is pointing towards the table. So, of course, it updates when we add new records. Now let's go over to the sheet PivotTable. We want to convert it to an Excel table, build our pivot table, and then when we add new records, our pivot table will be connected to a dynamic table, and we can refresh it. I click in a single cell, Control-T, Enter. I go up to Table Tools, Design, over to Properties. I click in the text box, and I name it. I named it Unit Sales Table, and Enter. Now I'm going to click in a single cell and go up to Insert Pivot Table, or we use our keyboard, Alt-N-V. Now look at that. It already has the Excel table name we gave it. I'm going to click Existing Sheet Location, and I'm going to try and put it in E3. Click OK. I'm going to pull the pivot table field list. I'm going to drag products down to rows. Instantly, I get a unique list. Units down to values. It defaults to sum because it's a number. I don't like row labels, so I'm going to go up to Design, over to Report Layout, and Show in Tabular. Right-click inside the pivot table values area, number formatting. This is not a currency. This is a sum of total units. So I'm going to click on number and say comma. Definitely decrease the decimals to 0. Click OK. Now we can see right there, there's the number formatting. Now here's what's amazing about an Excel table. Over to the side, I have some records. So I want you to copy all of these, Control-C. And now the Excel table, if I click in a cell directly below in the first row, and when I Control-V, it didn't automatically incorporate them into the table, even though my computer set up differently than most other ones. On almost all other versions, you'll automatically have this incorporated into the Excel table. But no problem. There's two ways we can do it. We can actually point to the lower right-hand corner, and when I see that little blue backwards L and point to it, I see the diagonal black cursor. I can click and drag to expand the table. Now I'm going to Control-Z. We can also do it up in Design. Over here in Properties, Resize Table. I simply highlight and highlight the entire table. Click OK. Again, most of the time, the settings for your Excel version will automatically incorporate any new records when you add them below the data set. Now, we can come over to our pivot table, and as we saw earlier in the class, pivot tables don't automatically update like formulas. But if I right-click and point to refresh, when I refresh instantly, the pivot table updates because it's pointing to a dynamic Excel table. All right, let's go to our next example. I'm going to click on the sheet Sum. I want to click in one cell in the data set, Control down arrow, so it looks like I have like 600 records. Control up arrow. I'm going to click in a single cell, Control-T, Enter. I immediately want to go name it, Table Tools, Design, Properties. Click up in the text box. Something like Product Units Table, and Enter. Now I want to come over and I want to add, just do a simple formula. Alt equals is our keyboard for the sum function. Now I could click and Control-Shift down arrow to highlight, but Excel tables have this great option. If you hover your cursor at the top of any one of the fields, you can see that downward pointing black arrow. And all you do is when you see the black arrow, click. And instantly, it highlights the whole column. And look at this. It puts in the table name, and the field names are always in square brackets. Now, Microsoft has a fancy name for this. It's Table Formula Nomenclature. But it's totally cool. It names the range, and it's totally dynamic. It'll always have table name and in square brackets field names. Now, actually, when we get to study Access in this class, we'll see that the fields and formulas over in Access have square brackets. This convention of a table name and field names and square brackets shows up in a few other places in Excel also. But for our Excel table, it's totally amazing because when we add new records, the sum function will see all the new numbers and instantly update. It won't even take a refresh like the pivot table. I'm going to hit Enter. Now I want to click in that cell and Control-1 to open up Format Cells, Number, Comma, 0 decimals because that's units. Click OK. Now let's do the same thing for max. Equals MAX tab. We're going to find the largest number of units sold. Right at the top of the field, I see my black downward pointing arrow. I click, and it totally puts in table name, and in square brackets our field name. Close parentheses and Enter. Now let's add some new records. If you scroll over to the side, click in the top cell. I'm going to use Control asterisk on the number pad to highlight all the new records. Control C to copy. Control Home to jump to cell A1. Click in the data set. Control down arrow. Now, when you click right below and Control V, your computer will incorporate. When I do it, Control V, my computer's not set up to do that. So I'm going to click back in the table. I see Table Tools Design. Over to Resize Table. And then I'm going to use the keyboard Control-Shift-Down arrow. And that'll highlight all the way to the bottom, all the way down to 958. Click OK. Now all the records are incorporated in the table. Control Home, and our formula totally updated. Doesn't look like the max change, but F2, that's totally adding all of the new records. All right, we want to go look at our last example. I'm going to click on the sheet New Column and VLOOKUP. Now, example 5, we need to add a new column to an Excel table. Yes, we're totally allowed to add a column, and the table will incorporate the new column just as we saw. The table will add new records to the bottom. And the second thing we want to be able to do is we want to create an approximate match lookup table from a written statement. So here's our instructions at the top. The below sales table has already been converted to an Excel table. And the first thing you want to do is you want to click in that table, go up to Table Tools Design, and verify that it has a smart name. And it does, Revenue Table. The second thing we want to do is add a new column to the table to show quantity discount. Now, the quantity discount is given based on the number of units purchased. So here's our units purchased, 190, 138, 12, and so on. Here's our total revenue. We're going to give the customer a discount on total revenue based on units purchased. So the more units they purchase, the larger the discount we'll give the customer. And here's the written statement. And we're going to have to interpret this and create a lookup table so we can add an extra column, look up the units sold, and assign the right discount. And this is how you'll usually have to do these type of VLOOKUP formulas. You'll be given a written statement like this. You have to create the table, then create the formula. All right, here's what it says. If the customer purchased between 12 and 47 units, then they get a 25% discount. Customer purchased between 48 and 95 units, they get a 37.5% discount. Between 96 and 143, they get 43.75% discount. And finally, if the customer purchased 144 or more units, they get a 50% discount. Now, you may have to read this a few times when you first do this. But after you do it a few times, you get the hang of it. Now, the first thing about this is it doesn't say anything about what happens if there's less than 12 units. And it's assumed if you buy 11 or 10 or 9 all the way to 1, you don't get a discount. So that'll be our first category. Also, when we go to set this table up, we have to set it up the correct way if we're going to do approximate match lookup. Because realize this, 12 to 47, That means if we find a 12, a 45, a 29, any of those numbers get a 25% discount. So that makes this approximate match. And remember, that first column of the approximate match lookup table has to be sorted smallest to biggest. Now, I remind you down here, because this is the first time we've tried to translate some words into a lookup table. Then the rest of this says convert the discount table to an Excel table. So if we add new discount categories, it'll automatically update. And then we have 2 extra columns to create. And we'll talk about those in just a moment. All right, I'm going to make sure, since there's 2 columns we're going to add to the table, that there's at least 1 column before I start my lookup table. I'm going to click over in cell J19. Now, we're going to have 2 columns. The first one's going to be units tab. The second one's going to be the actual discount percentage, and enter. Now I want to highlight both of these cells and Control B to add bold. Now, remember, we're reading this. What we don't want to do for approximate match lookup is start with the biggest number. So I don't want to type 144, enter, 96, enter. I do not want to sort it from biggest to smallest. So that means I have to start with the smallest. Now remember, the smallest number that they gave us was 12. So that's the smallest number for the second category. I'm going to put a 12 here. 12 all the way up to 47 units is going to get 25%. And I'm going to enter them as a decimal, so I'm going to type 0.25. If we want to format them later as a percentage, we can, and enter. Now, if that's the second category, what's the first category? Well, remember, we could have 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, all the way to 1. But I'm definitely going to start to 0, because we might have a situation where there was 0 units for some reason. It got zeroed out or something. So the smallest possible number that we could have in our data set is 0. We're never going to have negative units. So the trick to setting this table up is you need to be able to incorporate all of the numbers. Whatever the very smallest number is that you can have in your data set, that's the lower limit for our first category. And of course, they get a discount of 0. All right, so our instructions say 12 all the way up to 47. So that means the next lower limit is 48. Tab. What that means for this category, as we talked about last video, is every unit from 12 all the way up to, but not including the next number, will be included and get a 0.25 discount. All right, 48 all the way up to 95, 0.375. If we wanted to format that later, that would show as 37.5. All right, next upper limit. I'm looking up here. It says 96 to 143. The number in the first column always is the lower limit for this category. So 96 all the way up to 143 will get 0.4375. Remember, if we format this as a percentage, it would format it to show the decimal 2 places to the right. But I'm entering that as a decimal. All right, and the final category is 144, tab. And they get 0.5 and enter. So there's our first column, perfectly sorted, incorporating all the possible numbers. We're never going to get anything less than this 0. And if we get something bigger, of course, anything bigger than the last category just gets that discount. Now I want to convert this to an Excel table. So I click in a single cell, Control T, and I'm going to enact that OK button with Enter. I'm immediately going to go up to Table Tools, Design, Properties, and I want to name this table Discount Space Table. But guess what? Spaces are not allowed. We want to make sure and not have spaces. So Discount Table and Enter. So there is our Excel table. Now we want to add an extra column here. And our previous 2 examples where we added records to the bottom of the data set, I had my settings set up on my computer so that they would not automatically become incorporated. Now, if I type the name of the column here, and it gives us our name up here, discount on total revenue. If I hit enter, it should incorporate it into the table just like earlier when I pasted new records below. It should have totally incorporated them. So let me show you that setting, which I have set on my computer. We have to go up to File, down to Options, over to Proofing, over to AutoCorrect. This is the craziest location for a setting that has to do with Excel tables. On the auto format as you type, there it is. Apply as you work. Include new rows and columns in a table. I definitely want to check that now. And now if we add new records to the bottom of our table or add new columns, they'll automatically be included. Some computer systems have that unchecked, and mine did. But I'm going to show you by clicking OK, clicking OK. Now, if I copy this in edit mode, put this cell in edit mode, Control V, as soon as I hit enter, that column is automatically included. And when we finish our two columns, we'll add some records to the bottom, and we'll see that that problem is fixed also. I'm going to come up to in between F and G and click and drag to expand that. Now, here's the cool thing about Excel tables and adding a new column. I can create my formula here equals VL tab. And we're going to use our Excel table over here. But we're also going to use cells inside of our Excel table. So normally for a lookup value, we count 1, 2, 3 cells to my left. And when I click, it shows up as a relative cell reference. But in Table Formula Nomenclature, this is what relative cell reference looks like. It, of course, has the field name in square brackets, but then they have this crazy syntax with an @ symbol and another square bracket. That means always look relative cell reference at the units column. All right, so that's our relative cell reference. We need to look that up, comma, the table array. Now, when we did VLOOKUP in example number 1, we highlighted the inside part of the table, and totally it was beautiful. It gave us the table name. Now I'm going to click on table array and delete. I got to show you another cool way to put that in, especially if it's a big table. If we were putting in columns, we would use that downward pointing black arrow. We saw that a couple of times. But if you hover in the upper left, and you see that diagonal medium-sized black arrow and you click, that also puts the whole table name in. And get this, the table name is locked as if it was an absolute cell reference. So as we copy down, it's locked on the discount table. Comma, column index, we're counting on our fingers, 1, 2. The second column has our discount, so I type 2. And we're doing approximate match. Remember, if we're going to look up 190, it races through until it tries to find the first bigger one. When it can't, it takes the last one. When we're down here at 138, remember, it'll race through, bump into the first bigger one, and jump back. That's an easy way to remember how approximate match works. So we do not need to put that final argument in because the default for VLOOKUP is approximate match. Close parentheses. And watch this. When I hit enter, it auto-populates all the way down when we have a formula in an Excel table column. We could control down arrow, go to the last cell, hit F2, and it's totally working. Our table formula nomenclature relative cell reference and our locked discount table. Escape, control up arrow. If you want to format this as a %, you can. I'm going to leave it as a decimal. Now, we have another column to create, and it's our net revenue column. And net revenue is going to be total revenue times 1 minus the discount. Now, down here for 0.25, if I multiply 0.25 times 527.40, that would give me the amount of the discount. So because I want the total net revenue, if I take 1 minus the discount, well, that would be 0.75. And that's what I multiply times the total revenue. Now, think about it this way. A discount, that means for every $1, I'm allowed to take away 25 pennies. So that means 75 pennies would be left over for the actual amount the customer has to pay. So 1 minus 0.25 is 0.75. So for every $1 of total revenue, now with the discount, they only have to pay 75 pennies. All right, so we're going to add an extra column. Net revenue. And when I hit enter, wow, that is so cool. A new column is automatically added. Now I'm getting nervous here. I'm going to delete that. Come up and expand the column. All right, now we're going to multiply 1 minus the discount times the total revenue. So equals, and in parentheses, 1 minus relative cell reference, close parentheses. Remember, we had to use parentheses because we need subtraction to happen before multiplication. So we have our 1 minus the discount times the net revenue. Already, you should have noticed something. Anytime we have extraneous decimals and we're multiplying them and we're dealing with money and we have the potential of using the formula result in other formulas, we have to use the round function. Now I'm going to come to the front of the formula. Actually, if we hit enter, right, we can immediately get our visual hint. We have a bunch of extraneous decimals here. Now I'm just going to edit the top one, F2. And right after the equal sign, I want to type round. And the way I've been teaching you in this class is you type the minimum number of characters. And when you see the function name highlighted in blue, you hit tab. But this function is going to steal that parentheses. Now, I don't know why Microsoft programmed it this way. But watch what happens when I hit tab. It totally stole that parentheses. And remember, we needed that parentheses there. So I'm very carefully going to type a new parentheses. I'm watching the color coding. I see that orange parentheses are around 1 minus discount, so I know it's correct. Now I'm very carefully going to come to the end. And this is getting dangerous, right? You do not want to click with your selection cursor because then it will put a cell reference there. I want, with my I-beam cursor, to click after the relative cell reference for total revenue, comma. And I'm watching my screen tip, comma, to get to number of digits. This is to the penny, so I type it 2. Close parentheses. And when I hit enter, it automatically populates down. So Excel table columns for our formulas are quite convenient. Now, we got this discount table information in an email. And of course, we set this all up so it's super dynamic. And then the boss sends over the email and says, oh, wait a second. The last category is 168. So now, watch this. We're going to simply click below. Last time we hit tab to add a new record. But any time we type anything or paste anything below here now, because we changed that setting, your computers probably were already set up this way. But as soon as I type 168 in tab, a new row in the table is included. And 168 qualifies you for 0.55. And when I hit enter, instantly I can already see that for this 190 right here, the 0.55 is showing up. And the net revenue changed also. Now, there's a few records off to the side that I want to copy and paste to the bottom of this table. Here they are. Control-C, Control-Home. And I'm going to scroll down. And I'm going to click in the top date cell, Control-down arrow to get down to the bottom of the table. And watch this. Remember, I just copied the date, the product, the units, the price, and the net revenue. These two columns have formulas. So watch what happens when I paste just the records for the first 5 columns. Control-V just like that. First off, I turned the feature on, so now it automatically incorporates. And our formula totally auto-copied down. All right, Control Home. All right, that was a lot of fun with the Excel table feature. Example 5, we saw how to add extra columns to an Excel table. We also, in example 5, saw how to set up an approximate match VLOOKUP table and use the Excel table feature to make sure if we added any new records, it updated. We also, in this example, saw how to change the settings if your columns were not being added automatically or the rows at the bottom were not added automatically. Over on the sum sheet, we saw how to use the Excel table feature to do basic calculations. And when we add extra records, they totally update. Pivot tables. We saw how to build a pivot table based on an Excel table. So if new records are added, we can easily refresh it. Over on the chart sheet, we saw how to make a simple daily tracking table. And since it's an Excel table, our chart totally updated with new columns as we added new data. And we started off with data validation drop-down list and the VLOOKUP function based on an Excel table. So when we add new records, both of those features update. Now, if you like that video, be sure to click that thumbs up, leave a comment, and sub, because there's always lots more videos to come from excelisfun, including the next Excel Basics video, which will be about mixed cell references. All right, we'll see you next video.